Welcome to the House Committee on Corporations. Today is Monday, March 8th, 2021. We are in room 35 of the State House. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Solomon.
Here.
First Vice Chair O'Brien. Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Present.
Representative Casey. Representative Chippendale.
Present.
Representative Fenton Fung. Representative Hawkins.
Present.
Representative Kazarian. Representative Kennedy. Representative Lima. Charlene Lima? Steve Lima, now you're next. Steve. Representative Phillips.
Present.
Representative Potter.
Present.
Representative Serpa. Representative Shawcross Smith. Chairman, there is a quorum to start.
We have 13 bills on the calendar today. So first bill we will take up is House Bill 5203 by Representative Phillips, which would permit the Division of Motor Vehicles to suspend the registration privileges of motor carriers upon receipt of notice from the Department of Labor and Training that the motor carrier has not secured workers' comp insurance. Is there a motion for passage?
So moved.
Made by Vice Chair Caldwell, seconded by Representative Hawkins. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will ask a roll call. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Clerk, please take the roll.
Chairman Solomon.
Aye.
First Vice Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Aye.
Representative Chippendale.
Aye.
Representative Hawkins.
Aye.
Representative Steve Lima. Representative Phillips.
Aye.
Representative Potter.
Aye.
Representative Shawcross Smith. Chairman, the motion passes 9-0.
All right, 5203 passes and goes to the House floor. Next bill, we have 5507 by Whip Kazarian, an act to vacate the forfeiture or revocation of the charter of MC Souza Truck and Excavation. Is there a motion for passage made by Representative Phillips, seconded by Vice Chair Caldwell? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye after a roll call.
Chairman Solomon.
Aye.
First Vice Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Aye.
Representative Chippendale.
Aye.
Representative Hawkins.
Aye.
Representative Steve Lima.
Aye.
Representative Phillips.
Aye.
Representative Potter.
Aye.
Representative Shawcross Smith. Chairman, the motion passes 9-0.
5507 passes. Next up, we have House Bill 5906 by Representative Norrie, an act to vacate the forfeiture or revocation of the charter of Warwick Neck Avenue, Inc. Is there a motion for passage made by Representative Hawkins, seconded by Vice Chair Caldwell? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Will Clerk, please take the roll.
Chairman Solomon.
Aye.
First Vice Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Aye.
Representative Chippendale.
Aye.
Representative Hawkins.
Aye.
Representative Kennedy. Representative Steve Lima.
Aye.
Representative Phillips.
Aye.
Representative Potter.
Aye.
Representative Shawcross Smith. Chairman, the motion passes 9-0.
Okay, 5906 passes. Is there a motion to hold the remainder of bills
So
for
moved.
further study? Made by Vice Chair Caldwell, seconded by Representative Hawkins.
Yes, Representative Kennedy, I finally was able to get through on the audio, so I'm here as well, and vote in favor of holding.
Thank you.
So ordered. So there's a motion and second to hold the remainder of the bills for further study. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Chairman Solomon.
Aye.
First Vice Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Aye.
Representative Chippendale.
Aye.
Representative Hawkins.
Aye.
Representative Kennedy.
Aye.
Representative Steve Lima.
Aye.
Representative Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Potter.
Aye.
Representative Shawcross Smith.
Aye.
Chairman, the motion passes 10-0.
All right, so first bill we'll take up is Representative Lombardi's Bill 5508, which would provide that any rate increase with respect to electric distribution companies would be no greater than the increase in the CPI or 5.5%, whichever is greater, unless there is an approval of a higher rate by the General Assembly. Representative Lombardi, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and very quickly, you stated that very succinctly and accurately, and the SAC would basically provide any rate increase with respect to electric distribution companies would be no greater than the increase in the CPI of 5.5%, whichever is greater, unless there is approval by the General Assembly. And what this does, Mr. Chair, with all that's going on with the joblessness and COVID, and especially in those areas that are in the less affluent areas in the minority community, it would make, the rate increases predictable, transparent, and by the book. So it's just an easier way and a better way to be more predictable and accurate. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will endeavor to try and answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions for the sponsor of the bill?
Mr. Chair, thank you and the committee so much, and I'll be talking to you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
All right.
We did receive written testimony in favor by Jordan Goyette, and that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5508. So next up, we would take up House Bill 5673 by Representative Morales. This would transfer from the electric distribution companies to the infrastructure bank planning and administration of the interconnection of renewable energy to the electric distribution system. Representative Morales.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you again for the opportunity to discuss and consider House Bill 5673. In summary, this bill would transfer the administrative and planning authority for the interconnection approval from National Grid to our state's infrastructure bank. For context, before any renewable energy projects can begin, such as rooftop solar panels or a wind farm, they need to physically sync up to our existing power grid. This is called interconnection. As it currently stands, National Grid holds the authority to study and approve requests for interconnection. Therefore, developers focused on renewable energy projects are required to apply for interconnection to National Grid and pay them associated fees for the process. To be clear, however, applying for interconnection does not mean or guarantee approval. Unfortunately, many renewable energy developers are concerned that this current structure to receive approval for interconnection from National Grid is a major barrier to building more renewable energy infrastructure across our state. Specifically, many developers have cited a lack of transparency from National Grid in terms of how long projects must wait to receive an approval or rejection for interconnection, alongside a lack of transparency with how much National Grid will charge them for the administrative and planning process. Today, we will hear from expert witnesses who will elaborate on their experiences of working with National Grid on interconnection. Overall, climate advocates and renewable energy developers alike have concluded that National Grid is slowing down the process for interconnection and making it more difficult for renewable energy projects to happen. After all, National Grid does not have an incentive to approve interconnection requests, as small-scale renewable energy projects built close to electricity demand reduces the need for the deployment of grid infrastructure, which is one of the main ways in which National Grid earns their profit. It is clear National Grid has competing interests that disincentivize them from having a transparent and efficient process for interconnection. Therefore, by transferring the authority of interconnection approval from National Grid to our state's infrastructure bank, this will guarantee a more accessible and transparent process for the planning and approval, as they are accountable to the public, thus putting our state on a path to adopting more renewable energy infrastructure, which in turn will create meaningful jobs and make our state more resilient to climate change. Given our state's goal to achieve 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2030, per former Governor Raimondo's Executive Order 2020-1, this is a necessary piece of legislation we need to pass to make a sustainable future a reality here in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Have you spoken with anybody from the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank?
Yes, I spoke to the General Treasurer who oversees the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, and he was in support of this.
Okay. If you could reach out to him, maybe to send a letter, that would be great. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I will get a letter and then send it out to the committee after.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness?
Just one.
Representative Phillips.
Representative Morales, the infrastructure bank, can they handle all of this stuff here on top of all their other duties? I concur with what the chairman had said about there was no testimony from the infrastructure bank itself, only from the general treasurer, which is great, but we tend to put a lot of things on different divisions of the state government, and that we just want to make sure they can handle it. They're not going to be inundated and get far behind and bogged down, etc.
No, of course, and that is a very valid concern, so I thank you for raising that, Representative. So this is a revenue-neutral bill because we would transfer the state funding that we provide to National Grid for taking on this responsibility over to the infrastructure bank, which would then give them the capacity to hire more staff as needed to oversee these additional responsibilities.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Representative Morales. First up, we'll go to Christian Roseland. Christian, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you so much, Chair Solomon and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in favor of H 5673 today. My name is Christian Roseland, and I'm an energy writer and editor. I spent more than a decade covering the solar industry, and I want to bring up some relevant context to this bill. First off, we have former Governor Raimondo's target for 100% renewable energy in the electricity sector by 2030. There's also other active legislation, including a bill to set that in law, and the Act on Climate legislation, which would require 45% greenhouse gas reductions by 2030. That would mean essentially the same thing, because the electricity sector would have to do most of that in the early phases. So these are ambitious goals, and we can do these things, but only if we move fast and efficiently to build and interconnect renewable energy. Now, currently, National Grid controls interconnection, but what I've heard from speaking to people in the solar industry is that there's been a tremendous lack of transparency, extreme delays, and unpredictable, chaotic processes to interconnect. Unfortunately, Rhode Island is not the only place where National Grid has failed to plan for renewable energy deployment. In 2019, National Grid was investigated by the Massachusetts DPU for massive interconnection delays involved with a large cluster study that they launched, which basically was the result of their failing to plan for a large amount of solar that came online under the SMART program. My publication at the time covered that story. We knew for years in advance that as soon as the SMART program opened up, there'd be a ton of solar, and we wrote that. But National Grid told journalists that it was surprised by the volume. Now, the solar installers and developers that we're talking about are typically locally owned and run. They employ Rhode Island residents in good jobs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They help local businesses save money, and they help make a more stable grid. They are being harmed by National Grid's handling of interconnection. But that National Grid would delay interconnection, I don't think should be a surprise. Unfortunately, there are multiple conflicts of interest here. National Grid is in the business not only of delivering electricity, but also gas and of building gas pipelines. A rapid move to renewables and electrification of heating directly threatens National Grid's business. But more centrally and more importantly, National Grid cannot mark up the power that it delivers. It makes its return, its regulated return, on deploying transmission and distribution infrastructure. The more we install distributed solar and batteries close to the load, including solar on the roofs of homes and businesses, the less that infrastructure is needed. So the same facilities that National Grid has control over interconnecting undermine its profits. While this system may predate large-scale deployment of rooftop solar, it doesn't change the fact that the way things are set up right now, the fox is guarding the hen house. Now, this bill would give authority over interconnection to a neutral party in the state to interconnect renewable energy housed in the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. It would have a specific mandate to do so in a more transparent and predictable manner. And I think it's important to consider having the state do this because while National Grid will protect its monopoly, the state can advance state interests and state policy. Now, as part of this, National Grid will have to share its data, but we believe that this can and should be done. I want to close by saying that interconnection is a wonky business, but ultimately this is about protecting Rhode Island businesses in a growing sector from the anti-competitive behavior of a monopoly. It's also about meeting the greatest challenge of our lives, which is the challenge of transforming our electricity system to a cleaner, more reliable system.
Thank you. Can you just remind me where you're calling from, Christian?
I'm calling from Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, but on behalf of an organization or
No, I'm not.
Or just
working
as a
on behalf of
citizen?
the organization, as an individual and a citizen.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Christian Roseland? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Whip Kazarian, would you like your votes recorded in the affirmative?
Yes, please, Chairman. Thank you.
So ordered. Next, we will go to Attorney Seth Handy.
Seth is unavailable, Galen's up.
All right, Seth Handy is currently unavailable. I know he did provide written testimony for the hearing. So we will go to Kaylin Polly. Kaylin, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Kaylin Polly. I am a constituent of Senator Anderson and Representative Bennett, a member of District 31's Democratic Senate Committee, and a community organizer within Rhode Island's climate movement. I wanted to testify in support for House Bill 5673 because I strongly believe we need to expand our state's renewable energy infrastructure, and this bill would help us do exactly that. I believe every Rhode Islander deserves a livable climate with breathable air and clean water to drink, and I want my future children to live in a world that is safe from climate chaos and disasters, and I think this bill brings us a step closer to that future. As a resident of Warwick, a city that will lose over 500 homes to sea level rise, I know the urgency of fighting the climate crisis, and transferring the responsibility of interconnection to our state's infrastructure bank would help us expand renewable energy, which is something we need to do now before it is too late. So I urge you to consider this legislation and support it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you very much for your testimony. We do have Seth Handy on the line right now, so. Seth, you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you. My name is Seth Handy. I'm an energy attorney in downtown Providence, Rhode Island. I've lived here my whole life in Rhode Island, and I'm testifying on behalf of my firm, not on behalf of any client. I just want to say overall that interconnection is the point of transition between the new energy economy and the old energy economy. And the mechanics of how it works is critically important to the future of our energy portfolio here in the state of Rhode Island. I was able to review some of the testimony provided in writing for this hearing, and I've also written my own testimony, and instead of going over the written testimony I filed, I'd like to just respond to the testimony provided by National Grid. First of all, the graph on the first page of the testimony is a graph showing interconnection applications, not actual interconnections. So it's a bit misleading. I would suggest that they should produce a graph of the actual interconnections achieved, and you'll see how it corresponds to the applications and the problem that exists with the interconnection of renewable energy. As far as authority goes, the testimony claims that you have given the authority over this to the Public Utilities Commission and to the utility. Clearly, this legislation would transfer that authority. You clearly have the authority to do so, and it's in the interest of the state that it be done. The Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank has an enabling act that would allow it to administer this function. It will hire the expertise with the transfer of the budget to administer it much more effectively and better in alignment with the energy goals of the state of Rhode Island. And that administration will interconnect more local renewable energy, which will actually make our system much more secure than it is today. Our energy plan in Rhode Island is that diversification is the means to establish energy security, and that's what interconnection provides. The PUC will always oversee interconnection. That's not going to change with this legislation, despite National Grid's testimony. The PUC will still oversee interconnection. It will just be administered by an agency that is better aligned with the interests of Rhode Island policy. And we won't need the prescriptive law. The reason it deletes the existing law on interconnection is because we've had to be very prescriptive of National Grid's administration because of its conflicting interests. We will not need all of that prescriptive legislation if we have an entity administering interconnection that's aligned with Rhode Island's energy goals. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony, Seth. And if National Grid is here listening to this, we have received testimony opposed to this bill, in opposition to this bill from National Grid. I would request that they do provide, even though they've provided the applications, if they could provide the actual interconnections to the House Committee on Corporations, that would be appreciated and would assist in our decision making on this bill. Are there any questions for Seth? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
John Fitzgerald?
We have next John Fitzgerald Weaver, the commercial solar guy. John, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is John Fitzgerald Weaver. I am the owner of Commercial Solar Guy. We're a solar power developer and general contractor. We build, develop, sell solar power projects in the state of Rhode Island. And personally, I've been in the solar industry since the late 2000s and probably have built well over 100 systems. I'm commenting on this testimony on this legislation because I feel that the work that goes into building a solar power project is very complex for business owners and commercial customers with large-scale ground mount projects as well. And there's very little transparency in how we move forward and how we can communicate with our customers. It makes it challenging for a business owner to take on solar power development risk because most business people want to buy a thing they know works. And me as a solar developer, at the time when I asked the customer to spend a few $1,000s to build the first solar, to do the first solar applications, I have to be honest with them and say, hey, it's a challenge. We don't have 100% of the answers. There's thousands of dollars that will be spent, and it could be that the utility, National Grid, has to tell us, no, we can't do that. And there's a lot of challenges that go into it. At multiple points during the development process, there can be reasons that are seemingly not engineering related that move projects forward. And that can be frustrating because as a very detail-oriented salesperson, I will give to my customer an explicit price. I'll say, customer, we believe it's going to cost this to build. And I have at times been told I will have to pay $20,000 to $30,000 more, which is acceptable. We know that we have to upgrade the power grid. However, when it then comes to the final project pricing, that $20,000 to $30,000 is no longer there. And while it might sound great in the end that the customer doesn't have to pay a $20,000 to $30,000 grid upgrade fee like it was suggested, it makes me, the sales guy, the developer, look a little foolish because I had to work with a customer to get them to approve a $20,000 to $30,000 upgrade. And that's a 5% project increase. And I had to work at it, and I don't always get it done. And after getting that done, showing the customer the financials, working through the process, showing them conversations I had with engineers, the number disappeared. So that work in this fairly opaque process kind of floated away.
John,
and that's a challenge.
John, if I may interrupt you for a moment, generally speaking, how long is the process?
Well, there's a legal requirement that it's supposed to be 55 to 65 business days. However, I had one that took a year, 9 months. This one I'm speaking about, a year to 9 months, because we went back and forth. We $20,000 to $30,000 fee, which we were cool to pay, but it was supposed to be 3 months. Instead, it ended up being 9 months, 10 months.
Thank you. Yeah, you may proceed if there's anything additional you'd like to add.
The only extra piece I would say is that I know the people I'm working with, these engineers, are great because they're smart. They know their stuff. The contractors that National Grid has hired, they're good people. I'm thinking of 2 of them I'm working on with this project, and from a technical standpoint, they're solid at it. They have the details. They know the project. They say we can build this, we can't build this, and it works. But I know that they have so many projects going on that there's a management level that's off, that the smoothness of this is not happening. And so it leads me to not be able to communicate clearly. And so I don't want to say that the people are bad. It's just there's a process that really needs to be worked. And I think National Grid had some challenges in the state of Massachusetts. And we also have recent electricity utility challenges for interconnection in Maine. And so I think there needs to be some pressure. We got to explore this and work it harder, because our local power grids are a public service that the people own, the local businesses own. And if we don't take care of them, we're going to see what happened in Texas, and it can happen in other places. And so I think we really got to focus more on this distribution level, make it safe and a valuable tool for the locals who truly own it. Because I think it's possible that National Grid is focused in its many, many other states where it has power grid assets. And maybe we kind of don't get focused on as much here. I'm not certain, but it's a challenge, and it should be an easier process, or at least transparent. We should have some significant insight into how things should work here, because this is a public asset that should be very, very open.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for John? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, John. We have received written testimony in favor from Jordan Goyette, and we've received written testimony opposed from National Grid. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5673. Next, we will go to Representative Place's Bill 5326, which would provide for the authorized taking of mushrooms from public lands. Representative Place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the 3rd year in a row I've introduced this legislation. DEM always has concerns about it because they actually think, at least in my opinion, they see human interaction with public lands as a detriment to the property itself. But in essence, what this legislation would allow is allow for someone to go onto state lands and harvest mushrooms. Believe it or not, it's a big thing, especially when you get out into the more rural areas of the state. A lot of people like to go around, harvest the mushrooms, cook them up, just come up with new and different ways to present them. And as of right now, while DEM doesn't necessarily enforce the restriction on it, there's always those times where if someone who's out doing it kind of rubs the park ranger the wrong way, they kind of use it against them. So this is just a way to allow folks to be able to go out there and harvest the mushrooms as they've been doing, without, undue, intimidation from the park rangers and things like that.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you. We have not received any additional written testimony on this bill. So that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5326. Next, we will go to Representative Place's Bill 5490, which would allow individuals receiving a state pension to serve on a fire district boards, Block Island Utility Board, and Pasco Utility Board. Representative Place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of right now, the majority of our fire district, all of our fire district boards are pretty much volunteer positions. But if they're drawing a pension, there's a requirement that if you go to a meeting, if you attend just one meeting, you have to report a half a day's worth of work against your, I believe, 75 days worth of work you're allowed to do as a pensioner with the state of Rhode Island. And I know from personal experience, while maybe one meeting a month doesn't really add up very quickly, if you're actually active and want to give back to the community and work on these boards and commit to these boards, you're often working, or I should say volunteering your time a lot more. I can remember going to 3 meetings a week, and some of these folks not only have this volunteer role, but they also do have part-time jobs that also take up some of their work requirement, the time they're allowed to work as a pensioner. And we at the Harrisville Fire District just recently lost 2 fire commissioners of a 7-member board because of this regulation. It was, quite frankly, unknown at the time, and one of them inquired about a raise in their pay if they were to move up to the chairmanship, and they got a very surprising answer from the pension board saying that, you would have to report not only the pay but the hours worked as well. And while that may not sound too difficult for some of these smaller fire districts that only have 2 people in the office, those kind of things, those kind of reporting requirements time after time can take up a lot of time and effort. And again, from the pensioner standpoint, the volunteer on the board standpoint, it's just not worth it if they're going to lose time that they could possibly work at other places to this volunteer role. So like I said, because of this regulation, the Harrisville Fire District lost 2 excellent people on their board, and they had to go out and replace them. And I'm telling you that the pool of people willing to volunteer for a lot of these positions nowadays just isn't as large as it used to be. So this is just a small attempt at allowing some of our pensioners to give back to the local fire districts. And I added Pasco Utility and Block Island Utility because they're the only 2 entities of their type in the state other than the fire districts where this really is very prevalent.
So, Representative Place, is it a state law or a regulation that's precluding these people from serving on these boards?
The pension board referenced RI General Law 3610, 36 paragraph B.
All right, can you repeat that?
It's 3610, 36 paragraph B. I'm still not used to quoting that stuff the way it's supposed to be. You lawyers got this stuff down, but that's I'll show if you want to. I can bring it up. I have it written down in the order that they quote it. I can look it up, but
if you could send that to the committee, CC the legal counsel
and again, what that in essence says is a person who's a pensioner for the state of Rhode Island is allowed to work 75 full days or 150 part-time days. And they define a full day as 4 hours or more, and a half a day as 4 hours or less. So in essence, 1 meeting counts as a half of a day. And again, I personally probably within a given month, not only to the monthly meeting, but I probably showed up to different events and conducted different activities as part of my responsibilities, probably at least 5 times a month. And in some cases, the chair people have administrative requirements that require them to go in on a daily basis, some to check payroll and things like that. So this small requirement, while this doesn't sound like a whole lot in terms of a half a day per meeting, it can add up quickly, especially for the chairperson or vice chairman, or if you're on subcommittees, and then you take it into effect if you've got to negotiate a contract. I was meeting once a week at one point in time for definitely more than 4 hours when I was negotiating the union contract as a member of the Harrisville Fire District.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I do not believe we have any additional witnesses on this bill. We do not, and there is no written testimony. So that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5490. Next up, we will go to House Bill 5645 by myself. This would create a 13-member commission to study and provide recommendations regarding the licensing of residential builders and contractors, who would report back to the General Assembly no later than February 9th, 2022. We have witnesses on this bill, so I would take up first up is Bill Walsh.
Okay, thank you.
From the Rhode Island Builders Association. And Representative Fenton Fung, would you like your votes recorded?
Yes, please.
How would you like your votes recorded?
Yes on 5203, 5507, and 5906, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So ordered. And would you like your votes recorded on the motion to hold for further study as well?
Please do, yes.
All right. So ordered. No answer from Bill Walsh. Okay, we can go to Tom Fury. Tom Fury, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Fury. I'm the chairman of the Contractors Registration and Licensing Board, and I'm here to speak in support of the commission that's being contemplated.
Great. Is there anything additional you'd like to add?
No, the only comment I have is that I thought it should be expanded to include commercial contractors only, not just residential, but that's something that could be dived into later, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next, we would take Bill Walsh. Bill, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Walsh on behalf of the Rhode Island Builders Association, here in support of the study commission proposed by the chairman. We think it's an appropriate time to revisit this conversation about what level of licensure we should be holding our residential contractors to, and therefore that's really the reason why we're here asking for a study commission. There are varying levels of how other states proceed with these standards, and we think that at this point in the industry it's worth a review. And so with that, we're supportive, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 5645. Next, we will go to House Bill 5644 by myself. This would allow a condominium association to impose a fee of up to $125 for preparation of a resale certificate. The first witness we have is David Salvatore from the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. David, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. David Salvatore on behalf of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I want to thank Chairman Solomon for introducing this bill on our behalf. Over the last several years, the General Assembly has taken steps to addressing some of the concerns that we have around condo associations and delivering resale certificates on time. Another concern that we have is the amount that this resale certificate costs during the real estate transaction. We have looked at other states. The bill before you is modeled after the state of Connecticut, and we capped that certificate at $125. As many of you know, lenders require that financial documents are all dated at the end of the month, and what's happening is condo associations are selling, if you will, multiple resale certificates, and sometimes the cost of those certificates are upwards of 2 or 3 months worth of condo association fees. So we believe that this exorbitant amount of money to produce quite frankly, a piece of paper that can be provided for with the click of a button needs to be addressed. Again, this is a very competitive real estate market, and while the statute would or while the regs require the seller to pay for this, as all of you know, many of these fees are then passed on to the consumers. So, again, we fully support the bill. We thank the chairman for introducing it, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 5644. Representative Casey, would you like your votes recorded in the affirmative?
Yes, sir, I would. Thank you very much.
So ordered. Next bill we will go to is House Bill 5642 by myself. This would require employees of regulated financial institutions to report suspected financial exploitation of elder adults to the Office of Healthy Aging and provide authority to the regulated financial institution to place a temporary hold on transactions. The first person we will take up is Ryan Holt from the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. Ryan, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. This is Ryan Holt, the Director of Legislative Affairs for Attorney General Nerona, speaking in support of H5642, sponsored by you, Mr. Chairman. As a little bit of a background, this bill would allow our office, as well as some financial institutions, to intervene and obstruct events that could have some abuse to folks who are considered elders under the statute, which is 60 plus. And basically, it's if you want to think about it, it's instances where someone is being called. Sometimes you get those scam calls or those scam emails or whatever, where they call, they say, either trying to pretend to be somebody kidnapped us ransom, or, oh, you failed to pay your bill, it's your bank account number, we'll take it out now. Or, you can kind of, understand a lot of different scenarios that happened. And unfortunately, these scam artists often prey on folks who are elderly. This bill was a product of a working group over in the Senate. Our office, our elder abuse prosecutor, participated in that group, and this is one of the bills that have come out of that. Our office, our prosecutors, and myself have worked with the Rhode Island Bankers Association and other stakeholders to get the bill that's before you today. I do know that the bankers, Ray Lynch, who's a
Ryan, you're cutting in and out.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, is this better?
We got you.
Sorry about that. The perils of the virtual testimony. But as I was saying, the bankers are sending an expert, Mr. Ray Lynch, who's an attorney on this field. We've talked with Ray, we've worked with him on this, and I know he can explain things even further. But basically, if I got cut off, I wanted to just reiterate that this was a product of that Senate task force. We participated in that. We worked closely with the Bankers Association and other stakeholders to get the bill that's before you. And one other note, the Office of Healthy Aging, we've met with them as well. They are in support of this bill with a few amendments that we're going to work together with the bankers, other stakeholders, our office, to present to this committee, hopefully in short order. But once again, I appreciate the committee's time and consideration of this bill, and hope you can support it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Ryan, for your testimony. If there is any amended, any language that you would like amended, I would ask that you send it to myself and CCR clerk, and we can go from there. Are there any questions for Ryan Holt? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we will go to Raymond Lynch from the Rhode Island Bankers Association. Raymond, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on behalf of the Rhode Island Bankers Association. My name is Raymond Lynch. I'm the managing counsel in the Wells Fargo Bank Legal Department, and I manage a team that provides legal support to our branch networks in 36 states and the District of Columbia. We handle legal issues involving deposit account operational issues with a great deal of attention on fraud, especially financial elder abuse. For several years, I've been working with different state attorney general's offices, governmental sponsored working groups, and state bankers associations on adopting legislation that gives tools to governmental agencies that investigate financial elder abuse and banks to help stop financial elder abuse or stop further economic losses to elders and try to recover money for the elders and their families. The type of legislation that is before the committee under consideration right now in House Bill 5642 has already been adopted in 12 states and is under consideration in several other states right now. The benefits of this type of legislation involve allowing the department or law enforcement to obtain records from a bank without the need of a subpoena. And that will help to speed up investigations by the governmental agencies. Also, banks would be given the opportunity to reach out to persons that are reasonably associated with an elder to talk about their concerns about what they see and not violate privacy laws. Currently, privacy laws prevent a bank from discussing anything that they see on a customer's account unless the customer consents, there's a subpoena, or a court order. This provision would allow then a bank to contact family members to express their concerns, so family members may be able to take quicker action to help the elder, or reach out to, for example, an attorney who may have drafted a power of attorney when a bank sees an attorney in fact acting improperly, or to get more information to find out if the attorney in fact is really acting in the best interest of the elder. In addition, the legislation would not require a bank to file a report with the department as soon as they suspect something, but give the bank a very short time period to do an investigation and file a report either within 7 days of its suspicion or within 2 days of completing its investigation, whichever is quicker. And that would then allow banks to file more meaningful reports with the department as to what they see and allow then the department to have more information to realize this is a more substantial case to investigate. And lastly, one of the main aspects of the bill is to allow banks, either on its own action or at the request of law enforcement, to place a hold on a suspected transaction that involves financial elder abuse. And then this would allow further money leaving an account to the loss of an elder. And it's important to give law enforcement this authority because sometimes money is transferred. When a bad person takes money from an elder's account, they'll move the money from the elder's bank to the bank that they have an account with, and then that bank will know nothing about the source of the income. But yet when law enforcement may trace the funds after it's been taken from an elder and realize it's gone to another bank, that gives opportunity to law enforcement to reach out to that bank to have them prevent any more money being spent by the bad person. So this type of legislation is very helpful to the agencies that investigate elder abuse and to banks and will be beneficial to elders and their families. And I would be glad to answer any questions should any committee member have any for me.
Thank you for your testimony, Raymond. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Fenton-Fung.
Thank you so much. I love this bill. Having worked in home care for a while, see this all too often, unfortunately. I'm really glad that you're on the phone here. I was wondering what a bank's practices would be in these other states that have passed this type of legislation when it's the family member that's being suspected of exploiting the elder.
Yes, thank you for that question. I will say Texas has adopted this type of legislation, and they're very aggressive in using this type of legislation. So it isn't always The bad person could be a remote person, the online scammer because of problems with the internet. It could be the caretaker, or at times it could be a family member, a grandchild, or someone who has received the power of attorney. It really doesn't matter the relationship of the bad person. It puts everybody in the same place. It allows, if the investigative agency thinks somebody is acting improperly, they can go to the bank and ask for a hold on a transaction. If the bank sees something, it could do the same thing and then file a report with the department and have that transaction held for a short period of time. And if either the law enforcement agency or the bank needs more time, then you can go to court and have a court review the entire transaction. And what's important in my experience in working with the other states that have adopted this legislation is it's that pause of keeping the money in a status quo while there is time to investigate. Because with technology, with swipe of cards or a push of a finger on a phone with Zelle or wire transfers, money can just fly out instantly. So that hold aspect is very critical in keeping the money in place when people suspect financial elder abuse.
I appreciate that. So does this also cover things like credit card transactions and whatnot, or is this purely like checking and savings accounts?
No, it will cover credit cards. It will cover home equity loans, which is a big area of financial fraud, of people trying to get those advances so they can have a lot of money. It would cover personal lines of credit. It is not restricted to only deposit accounts. It would cover any type of source of money that they can get from an account at which there is a relationship with the bank.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We have...
Thank you.
You can go ahead. Thank you. We have received written testimony in favor from the Credit Unions of Rhode Island, the Cooperative Credit Union Association in favor, and then the Rhode Island Office of Healthy Aging in favor, and Megan Conley from that office has been in contact with my office on this. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5642. Next, we will go to House Bill 5765 by Chairman Casey, which will require any public utility or its contractor to reimburse an excavator for lost time expense incurred. Representative Casey.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate your time. This is relatively quick. This is in addition to a bill, House Bill 5765. The premise of the bill is that it will require that any public utility or its contractor to reimburse an excavator for lost time and expense incurred, including manpower and equipment from the utilities' incorrect marking of the underground utilities. Essentially, this is to help cover if the ground markings are incorrect and an excavator breaks a line, causes damage to an unknown utility or any infrastructure underneath the ground where it was incorrectly marked, that the excavator itself themselves would not be liable. And if you look on page 2, line 10, section E, which is the current law, and it says, in the event that the excavator shall damage the underground public utility facilities as the result of an incorrect marking by the public utility, that the excavator shall not be responsible for resulting damage. This just continues on. The new language adds that under section F, in the event of an incorrect marking, the public utility or its contractor shall reimburse the excavator for lost time and expense incurred, inclusive of manpower and equipment resulting from the incorrect marking. We're just asking that the utilities take responsibility for an incorrect marking in the street, which essentially is causing the excavator does. If the excavator does their job correctly and digs only under the marking that they believe is correct, but then cause damages, that number one, they're not going to be liable, but number two, they're going to be reimbursed for any damages or expense incurred in repairing it. So with that, I'll take any questions that I have. This is a bill that was submitted last year, obviously by Representative Moran, but due to COVID, obviously we didn't get to it and we're resubmitting it again.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any question for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you. First, we will go to Michelle from Verizon. Michelle, you may proceed with your testimony. You're before the House Committee on Corporations.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I have provided written testimony explaining Verizon's position on this. And I just wanted to make sure that you realize that there is a process in place where we work with the Division of Public Utilities on any notice of probable violations. And to be honest, I've offered the last few years to meet with the folks who are asking for this legislation to be passed, because we at Verizon and other utilities don't see a lot of these violations happening, so we'd like to discuss it further. And I am available for any questions if you have them.
Thank you. May I ask, what percentage of your lines or utilities are underground?
I would say for Verizon, we are 87% aerial plant. So we only have very few underground, but I mean, obviously in some of like the downtown Providence areas and where construction's going on, we are all underground there. So some of those street projects, it's really important for us to be marked properly, and then the other construction projects. We do have some utilities that are aerial and then go underground to people's homes or businesses as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we will go to Bill Walsh from the Construction Industries. Bill, you are on the line. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you to Chairman Casey for sponsoring this bill. And this is Bill Walsh on behalf of the Construction Industries of Rhode Island, here in strong support. As the sponsor discussed, this is really about holding accountable people for the mismarkings of their lines. It's a public safety issue both for the excavators that are going in and performing this work, as well as anyone surrounding them when they strike something that was not known to them being underground. And so this seeks to encourage the utilities to properly go through the marking processes and make sure that these things are avoided so that we don't have any of these public safety issues. But on top of that, it's really a question of for all the planning and processing that goes into going into this underground utility work, when a contractor goes and strikes something wasn't there, why should they be further held accountable for someone else not performing their due diligence? It's unfair to that contractor who has to shut down the site, let alone the public health and safety risks that they have for themselves. So we are in strong support of the bill. I do know that there are other experts who can provide first-person perspective for what it means on the ground, and so I would defer any technical questions to them, but with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness?
Chairman.
Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Walsh, we just heard from Verizon that said they have very minimal amount of infractions on this type of utility work. Is that your same consensus? Is that they do the same thing and they don't have a lot? And if there is a lot of this type of abuse going on where they mismark the area, could you tell us which utilities might be the ones that are the bigger culprits so we know that they should be the ones that are held more accountable?
Thank you, Representative. It was great to hear from you this afternoon as well. As it relates, I did listen to a portion of the testimony as it relates to Verizon being mostly aerial, and therefore I would contend that this is not something that is so directed at them. There are a lot of aging infrastructure and other utility companies that just simply either have never updated their full markings, or they have a general idea they can't get it so precise, but there's nothing really motivating them to go correct this. So without calling attention to any other specific ones, I would defer to Mr. Robbins, who can speak to his experience on whose pipes or utility lines they have struck on the ground personally, but I don't have the perspective to be able to inform you the companies or entities of whom this is so directed. It's really about trying to encourage everyone to do their job, and the reality is we would applaud for no one to be compensated because we wouldn't be striking anybody's lines whatsoever. So kudos to Verizon for doing their diligence appropriately, and we encourage all to really step up to the plate to make sure that we protect the public in this way.
Thank you. I believe Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy has a question for the witness.
Yes. Actually, Chairman, I introduced a bill for the town of Westerly very similar to this a couple of years ago. And I think one of the problems that we run into is the fact that you have that organization known as DigSafe, which is supposed to be going out there and properly marking these things. What we found in the town of Westerly was an issue where an underground natural gas line wasn't properly marked. We've also had issues where the underground lines for the water system have not been properly marked. So, I believe DigSafe has some responsibility in trying to address this issue, but I think we've got to get this issue addressed once and for all, because it does slow up projects, and potentially the contractor should not be held responsible for the inadequacies of the company that is supposed to be doing the proper marking for the utility companies.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. And thank you, Bill Walsh, for your testimony today. Next, we will go to Peter Robbins from D'Amber Construction. Peter, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Hello, this is Peter Robbins. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. I just wanted to call in today. Thank everybody for having me and letting me speak. I've been watching and listening, and this is like Bill Walsh had just said. This has nothing to do with any in particular company of underground utilities. Nothing to do with just Verizon alone. National Grid alone is the entity of it all in itself. I'm the Director of Safety for D'Amber Construction, as well as the Safety Committee member for the construction industries of Rhode Island. I'm also a member on the Safety Board for NUCARI, which is National Utility Contractors of Rhode Island. So I help and I go along with a lot of different people in the state and try to help them with safety-wise and safety things that go along with our construction companies. One of the biggest things that we have problems with is always the marking of unmarked or mismarked cables underground. DigSafe does indeed do a great diligence in doing the marking and handling the markings for different companies. Certain companies like National Grid and things and companies like that have opted to go and do their own markings because it is difficult to have a third-party company doing the markings for you, especially if the drawings are wrong or the drawings are outdated that you have for underground lines, which is something that we see a lot of. The drawings are old, they're outdated, they don't know, things like that. Those are a lot of times, those are lines that we hit. Our biggest thing for something like a bill like this is more for the safety for our employees out in the field, for every company, knowing that if we're putting a bucket in the ground and we're staying within our tolerance zone of a line, we're making sure that we're not hitting anything but ground, nothing but dirt. There's no gas lines, there's no electrical lines coming into play when we put that bucket in the ground. But unfortunately, that's not always the case when we do things. We hit mismarked ones, numerous times throughout a year. It's part of the business. It's part of doing the jobs. We go out and do accident investigations. We do things like that. One of the things that's also very difficult for someone on our end is, we hit something that is marked and have a problem. We just get a bill sent to us, and that's all there is to it. We hit something that's not supposed to be there. Now all of a sudden we have to go hire lawyers and we have to do all this stuff. And not only that, but we usually get a bill sent to us anyway from these companies saying it was our fault to begin with because nobody did their due diligence on their end. We're trying to work with that one to try to be better, but it happens all the time. We have committee hearings we have hearings for NOPVs, which are notice of probable violations, through the state itself, where we go meet and we figure out whose fault it actually was when things came down to it. But when things come down to it, that doesn't stop the fact that we could have been shut down for a day or even more sometimes, depending on how long it took for a company to get out there, depending on things like that. A lot of different factors on how long things take and what the effort is into actually get our guys back working if there is a strike that isn't our fault.
Peter,
but mainly it's more...
You
sorry.
said that
Yeah.
there's some companies that do their own markings. Which companies are those?
Correct. Right now, there are some companies in the state that do not belong to DigSafe. Not everybody belongs to DigSafe, which is something we're working on also. National Grid does belong to DigSafe, but they do their own markings by themselves. They have their own team that goes out and does the markings for National Grid to go out there, so they get their own marks because they go off their own drawings. National Grid is easier to work with when it comes to a strike because we get somebody out there. But it's also, on the other hand, it's also very difficult to work with them when there's a strike because there's a team that has to show up to fix it. They always put down, even though it's during the day, it's considered emergency time, so there's added fees to that. There's a 12 trucks that come out instead of the one that needed to do the actual fix. The bills go up and up and up for a smaller company that just did something that wasn't their fault. They shouldn't have to be put in that kind of position. It's difficult.
And what are the other companies that do their own markings beside National Grid?
Off the top of my head, I would have to get the list for you. It would be pretty much the companies that aren't part of DigSafe, and I know National Grid is the big one that does it on their own. But if you're not part of DigSafe, there are some entities like County Water, I believe, is not another part of DigSafe. There's a list of companies that I could get to that are not part of DigSafe in the state. A lot of small municipalities, Bristol Water's out there. They're not part of DigSafe. Things like that they've opted to do their own markings, which is smaller companies, the electrical ones within Johnson that don't do it, that they do it themselves. So the marking ones, but DigSafe itself is just a third-party entity that takes the information from the larger company and then just goes and do what they are supposed to do based off of a drawing. So holding them responsible is difficult unless they were to put the marks in the wrong spot. But they're just being told what to do,
Okay, great. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Fen Fung.
Peter, thanks for your testimony here. This is out of my wheelhouse, so I apologize if this seems elementary, but given the amount of infrastructure work that we're currently doing all across the state right now, when we're digging up a road, I'm thinking of Cranston right now and Edgewood and all the work that Providence Water is doing. Is there a coordinated opportunity, like once that road's opened up, that we're marking and we're updating where everything's going in? Is there one central database, or are we all still kind of haphazard here?
No, so we put a mark in, we put a DigSafe ticket in, usually 30 days. 30 days before we start doing work. And then the DigSafe we can start doing work after 3 days after the DigSafe as the ticket's been fulfilled. So we usually get our marks done before our job starts, and then with the new DigSafe laws, the companies themselves we're responsible for keeping those marks on the road, whether that be either remarking them, marking with stakes, or just keeping them fresh, so that DigSafe doesn't have to continuously come back out just to mark spray paint, because we all know that spray paint over time does just go away with weather conditions and things like that. But no, we take care of our DigSafe marks in the beginning, and then it is pretty much on whoever the contractor is out on the job to maintain a understanding of what is going on the road and where they're going forward, and just keep their eye out. Pretty much, we have to always keep the eyes in the back of our head open at all points of times, even when we're digging around marks, just to make sure that we don't hit anything else, because we're always wary of the fact that the mark's not right.
I apologize. I wasn't clear enough in my questioning. I apologize. When say the road's opened up and we see the gas line, the water line, whatever else, you're only marking what you're dealing with, right? It's not the other things. We're not just down there, since the road's opened up, we're not taking a better look at what's going on and updating.
No, we put in a DigSafe ticket, and the DigSafe ticket lets us know what is in that vicinity, what's underneath the road of where we told them, and then that is the only thing that gets marked. We don't open up and decide to see that, let's see that this road, this pipe goes this way, then it turns left, where they told us it turned right. We will call in and say that, hey, we have a road that's got a mismark. We won't just rebury it. Okay. We won't do that. Some companies can. We don't have to call it back in to let everybody know that we see something here that's not right. We usually just keep on going. But a lot of times we will call and say, hey, there's a pipe here that's not supposed to be here. We didn't hit it, but someone should know about this.
Okay.
And then usually they'll send someone.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony, Peter. That concludes the verbal portion of 5765. We have received written testimony in opposition from Verizon as well as Providence Water. And then we have received written testimony in favor from the National Utility Contractors Association of Rhode Island. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5765. Next, we will go to House Bill 5766 by Chairwoman Williams, which would allow Superior Court to require a person affixing an architectural stamp within 5 years to provide evidence that services were performed by the entity named in the certificate or certificate of authorization. There are no witnesses on House Bill 5766, so that concludes the testimony on that bill. House Bill 5643 by myself would update a portion of the insurance receivership statute to the current National Association of Insurance Commissioners standards. I am withdrawing this bill, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5643. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded, and we are adjourned. Thank you.